Hello, welcome back to Hazel Jane Tarot, and today we are talking about the Morgan Greer Tarot. Now, this is a classic tarot deck. It's one that was originally published, I think, in 1979. And the name Morgan Greer comes from the two creators. Bill Greer was the artist, and I'm not sure the first name of Mr. Morgan, who wrote the companion booklet. I could not find the booklet to do this review for you today. When I bought this, it comes in this tuck box. It's published by US Games. I pulled the little white book out, and I think I put it down the back of some books on my bookcase to just shove it somewhere where it wouldn't be in my way when I was trying to take the deck in and out of the box. And now I can't find it. But yes, this tuck box has seen better days. It is taped back together right now, and I need to get a nice bag for this deck to live in, because this is just getting a bit battered. But the deck is still in print. It's kind of one of those classic decks that's continually in print, because, you know, it's an oldie and a goodie. So I'm going to just have a chat with you about it today. There's not really much I don't like about this deck. This is probably like the fifth deck I bought myself when I first started, getting into tarot in a bigger way, and buying myself some new decks. So this is one that I've had for a while, and it is a really nice deck to work with. So one of the things I love about this deck is the colors. It is really heavily saturated primary colors, and it's really, really bright and kind of easy to read as a result. I think it just is really nice and clear. The images are totally based on the Rider-Waite-Smith, on Pamela Colman-Smith's art. Not super obvious from these cards, but when I show you the minor arcana in particular, you can see that they're sort of zoomed in versions of Pamela Colman-Smith's images. I mean, you can see that a bit maybe here in the Fool, where the cliff and everything is not so obvious. So it's a super beginner deck, but it might be easier to have this alongside a copy of the Rider-Waite-Smith in terms of learning the card meanings, because, as I say, there are things in the sort of scenic background that you can't really see in this deck. And I actually did buy this and the Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith at the same time, and I used this deck alongside the Morgan Greer when I was starting to study Pamela Colman-Smith's art and the sort of symbolism in those cards. Anyway, so it is very 70s, and I love that. I love the clear black line work in the deck, and, as I say, the bright colors. I love all the mustaches and the beards, and I mean, this Lovers card is pretty gorgeous. Look at those two people. The the mustaches are fantastic. I know a few people have said, this deck makes them a little nostalgic for the 70s, or, if you were around during the 70s, you might know or have been somebody with one of those mustaches or beards. And of course, beards are very much back in fashion. I mean, it's not that beards are only of the 70s. I love that Wheel of Fortune. It's very Monty Python, with the big hand of God turning the wheel. So there's a kind of a lightness to the Morgan Greer, kind of a, maybe not quite humor, but there's a lightness to the style of the art. Some of the cards do depart quite a lot from the Rider-Waite-Smith, so you'll notice, like, Temperance is very much like the image in the Rider-Waite-Smith. It has all the symbolic elements that you would recognize from Pamela Colman-Smith's art, but then Death is very different. You've got the Grim Reaper very clearly and dominating most of the image. You don't have the victims that you see in the Rider-Waite-Smith image. And the devil is very different as well. And this devil card might put some people off this deck because the imagery is quite, in your face. But other than that, it's mostly the major arcana are very similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith. So that's the majors. So the minor arcana are lovely. We have, I'll show you the aces, because the aces are all the same. I really like this in a deck actually, when the style of the 4 aces is very harmonious. What you find in this deck is kind of similar again to the RWS. You've got a lot of blue skies and a lot of yellow skies. And again, you have these, the hand of God is familiar from the RWS as well. But again, just the way it's drawn here has that sort of Monty Python sort of, I think it just gives it that lighthearted feel. Not that I don't get serious readings with this deck, I very much do, but it just has a lightness of touch, I think. I'll just show you side by side with the RWS so you can have a wee look at how similar the art is. I suppose the hand of God is a wee bit, it's funny in the RWS too. So anyway, here we have the person standing with the globe in their hand looking out and so on. It's very similar. You can see some of the elements have been moved, like the flowers from the pillar here are on their kind of shield that they seem to have up again on their arm. There is a second person here as well, which we don't have in this card. So it's a little bit different. But yes, if you're familiar with this deck, when you see this, you immediately recognize that's the person standing looking out over the battlements. But the situation, the scenery isn't as clear in the Morgan Greer deck because it is zoomed in. So again, you can see very similar. They just have no people in the Morgan Greer version. And I quite like, I do like these zoomed in images. I think you can get the energy of, sort of combative energy, the confused lack of direction and so on. You can get that with these hands, and just the intense colors and so on. It is nice to look at. The 8 of Wands, never the most interesting card in a deck. See, and it is kind of, it's expressive in a different way, like the facial expressions are different from each other. Sorry, that's not really focused yet. There we go. The person in the 9 of Wands here looks kind of a little bit frightened and wary and injured, whereas the 9 of Wands here, we have a much more determined, purposeful soldier, who's not maybe come through the battle in the same way that the 9 of Wands has. So there's slight differences in nuance, but they are very similar. I'm not going to do that for the whole deck, but you can see that the style is very similar, and the content of the images is very similar. So looking at the swords, I do really like the sword suit in this deck. Again, there's just something, there's a roundness to the image, to the art, which, it doesn't soften the swords. They're still pointy, but there's a roundness and a softness to the art style that I like. This 8 of Swords is one of my favorite cards in this deck. Just the lines and the lines of the ropes and this dress and the wind in the hair and the colors. Just visually, I really like it. So that's the swords. Then we have the cups. And I mean, as I'm sure you can see, with it being so based on the Rider-Waite-Smith, this is not a diverse deck. It's in the same way that the Rider-Waite-Smith isn't. It just copies the people that are in that deck. And it even has the same sort of kind of medieval costume strangeness and so on that you have in the RWS as well. And the Pentacles. I really like as well, you know, things like the consistency of how the Pentacles are designed. You know, you have all of these, the red and yellow repeated. So, you know, when you get a few of them in a spread, you can see really clearly, oh, I've got a lot of Pentacles, because you can see all of these yellow and red Pentacles recurring through the image. One of my favourite things in the Morgan Greer is the court cards. So I'm just going to show you them separately. They're very directional and they have a lot of personality. So that's the swords. I love the Queen of Swords in this deck. You know, she's staring right at you. And, you know, if you contrast the Knight with the King, they're very similar. But the King looks sort of solid and resolute. And, you know, he has the what would that be, like wheat or whatever in his hand, you know. So it's kind of the running of a successful kingdom, I feel like. Whereas, you know, the Knight of Swords, there's blood on his sword, you know, there's fire in the background. He's heading into battle, you know. So there's a real sense of difference in personality. And when you're reading with these court cards, you do have this quality of where they're looking and who they're looking towards and who they're turning away from. That can add a nice layer to your reading. Pentacles. And finally, the rods. So we've rods instead of wands, just in terms of the naming of the suit. But otherwise, it's very similar. And, you know, a lot of the, like the sunflower, the salamander. Ooh, that's kind of like a little winged creature. It's not quite a salamander, but a lot of the elements are very, very similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith art. So the backs are these blue star backs. They're not really reversible because they are slightly different. It doesn't really seem to matter. I mean, I do read with reversals sometimes, and I would use reversals with this deck. It's not obvious enough to put me off. When I'm shuffling, I can't really tell which way is up unless I really look at it. The cardstock, I mean, I don't know, there are different editions and printings of this. I think my printing is from 2004. So I don't know if the cardstock varies. US Games tends to be very reliable with cardstock, and these, there's something really nice and oh, I don't know how to describe the finish on these cards. It's it almost leaves a kind of a something on your fingers from holding it. It's, oh, I mean, that sounds bad. It's sort of buttery and soft. The coating that's on the cards is really nice. They slide past each other. I mean, if you overhand shuffle, they are just so smooth and easy to shuffle. If you riffle shuffle, which I'm not going to attempt to do on this video, they do have a nice enough flex to them. They're not, for me, they're not easy to riffle shuffle because I need a deck to be really bendy to be able to do that easily. But I think most people can probably riffle shuffle with this deck. It fans out really nicely. I mean, I really like the cardstock of this deck. I really like how it feels. And I mean, as I say, I've had mine for a while, so maybe that buttery quality is partly from it having been worked with a lot. But it's a really nice matte cardstock. It photographs really well. You know, apart from just the fact that it is dated, it's, you know, it's not based on modern society. You know, it has those kind of faux medieval characters and dress, and it's not diverse. Other than that, there's nothing really you could say against the Morgan Greer tarot. Personally, if you like the style of it, you know, it's kind of cartoonish and 70s, and I love all the moustaches and the beards and the bright colors, and I like that. I love that it's borderless. I think it always was borderless. So a bit ahead of its time in that sense. It got the trend before the trend. So yeah, if you haven't worked with this classic deck, if you maybe feel like you'd like a Rider-Waite-Smith base deck, but you're not keen on Pamela Coleman Smith's art, you definitely could do worse than the Morgan Greer. It's easy to get, it's not too expensive, and as a study deck, as a Rider-Waite-Smith base deck, and as a really solid reading deck to read for other people. And you know, I would tend to use this actually for reading for others more often than I have used it for myself. It's a really solid deck. So this gets a thumbs up from me. If you have used this, like this, don't like this, I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching.